I would like to welcome everybody to the 23rd day of the session, Friday, February 10th, 2023. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clouston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Davis?
Excused?
Eklund? Harrelson?
Excused.
Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd?
Excused.
Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas?
Excused.
Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman?
Excused.
Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh?
Excused.
Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Stivar?
Excused.
Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Walters?
Excused.
Ward? Washit? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan?
Excused.
Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Here.
Stivar? Davis? Ottman? Harrelson?
I see one more walking in. I cheated. I started 2 minutes early.
Nicholas? Walters?
All right, Chief Clerk, I think close the roll because I don't think I'm going to have a play ball.
Singh?
There we go. We'll get them in when we get going.
60 present, 2 excused.
All right. So today, Representative Heiner will give our prayer of the day. And we're not going to do play ball today. So when we're done with the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll roll right into our agenda. And so please rise.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin with a scripture. And behold, I tell you these things that you may learn wisdom, that you may learn that when ye are in the service of your fellow beings, ye are only in the service of your God. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come before Thee this morning as a group of legislators in this chamber, in this beautiful building, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to be of service within the state of Wyoming. We are grateful for the individual talents and abilities that bring us together, and we pray that we might be able to utilize these to further the work here within these walls. We are grateful, Father, for the opportunity of service, the opportunity of giving back into others. We are grateful, Father, for the leadership of our chamber. We pray for our speaker, our majority floor leader, and all those that lead and guide us, that they will be inspired and have wisdom as they guide us and facilitate the discussions. We are grateful, Father, for the staff that provide many hours of dedicated service to help us in our work. And we are grateful for our families that allow us to be here at this time, and we pray for their welfare and well-being, that they will be watched over while we are away. Father, this day we pray that we might have inspiration, that we might be able to exceed our own capacity and limits, to be able to do that which would be best within these walls, to have patience, to have humility and understanding. Father, as many of us are traveling in the next few days, we ask that we might be in the hollow of thy hand to be protected and guided, that we might be able to travel in safety. Father, we are so grateful for this time that we have together, for the friendships which we are able to develop and grow, and for the opportunities of serving our fellow men. We ask for wisdom, and we ask for thy Spirit to be here within these chamber walls this day. And we do so ask in the name of our Savior, even Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Heiner. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we are likely to go a little past noon. It's hard telling where we'll stop, but there's going to be, for you new people, there's going to be one new thing on the agenda, which is a request to concur. So we're going to do two of those today to kind of break you into what that is. And just as a note to those two committee chairs, Burkhart and Brown, I would be interested in who you want to see on those conference committees. So please get that to me over the course of time. And then the other thing we're going to do today after second reading is we're going to do the Wyoming Manual Procedures. The Joint Rules Committee met. We came up with a recommendation to the bodies. That'll be presented on the floor, and we'll vote on that. And let's see, with that, Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 9th, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved.
So we do have a nurse of the day, is that correct? Back there? All right, our nurse of the day is Darcy Cowardin, and she's the county nurse manager for Converse and Niobrara County. So please welcome her. And our student page today is Owen Fink from Powell, Wyoming. Owen, please stand up and everybody give him a round of applause. Owen, thanks. Thanks for being here. Messages from the Senate.
Message 279. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 24, State Investments Compensation Relocation Amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 26, noes 5. Message 282, concurrence requested. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 35, Daycare Certification Requirement Amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Ayes 30, noes 1. Message 284, concurrence requested. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 41, Lightweight Trailers, Permanent Registration. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 31. Message 286, concurrence requested. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 69, coal-fired facilities closures litigation funding amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30, noes 1. Message 287, concurrence requested. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 82, defendant mental illness examination amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 31. Message 294, conferees appointed. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with Alike Committee Number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 1. The Senate conferees are Senator Driscoll, Chairman, Senator Anderson, Senator Garou, Senator Nethercott, Senator Salazar. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
We're at that order of business of Senate files on first reading. The first Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 69.
Senate File 69, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
First reading of the bill.
Electronic records retention.
Senate File 69 is referred to Committee Number 1 Judiciary. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 91.
Senate File 91, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
First reading of the bill.
Creation of tenancy by the entirety.
Senate File 91 is referred to Committee Number 1 Judiciary. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 97.
Senate File 97, sponsored by Senator Hicks.
First reading of the bill.
Education Trust Fund transfer.
Senate File 97 is referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 146.
Senate File 146, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
State-funded capital construction.
Senate File 146 is referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 101.
Senate File 101, sponsored by IDE, Wyoming Legal Tender Act Amendments.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Legal Tender Act Amendments.
Senate File 101 is referred to Committee Number 3 Revenue. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 83.
Senate File 83, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss.
First reading of the bill.
K through 12 school facility leasing.
Senate File 83 is referred to Committee Number 4 Education. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 107.
Senate File 107, sponsored by Senator Hicks.
First reading of the bill.
Acquisition, exchange, and sale of trust lands.
Senate File 107 is referred to Committee Number 5 Agriculture. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 178.
Senate File 178, sponsored by Senator Boner.
First reading of the bill.
Mountain lion pursuit seasons.
Senate File 178 is referred to Committee Number 6 Travel. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 140.
Senate File 140, sponsored by Senator Pappas.
First reading of the bill.
Building code requirements, refrigerants.
Senate File 140 is referred to Committee Number 7 Corporations. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 38.
Senate File 38, sponsored by Senator Schuler.
First reading of the bill.
Special license plates, organ donations.
Senate File 38 is referred to Committee Number 8 Transportation. The next bill for our consideration is Senate Joint Resolution 5.
Senate Joint Resolution 5, sponsored by Senator Boner.
First reading of the bill.
Air Force 75th anniversary.
Senate Joint Resolution 5 is referred to Committee Number 8 Transportation. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 95.
Senate File 95, sponsored by Senator Ellis.
First reading of the bill.
Moon Landing Day.
Senate File 95 is referred to Committee Number 9 Minerals. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 79.
Senate File 79, sponsored by Senator Baldwin.
First reading of the bill.
Plan of Safe Care Newborns.
Senate File 79 is referred to Committee Number 10 Labor. So, ladies and gentlemen, one thing also on the Wyoming Manual of Legislative Procedures, that draft is in your mailboxes out there. So sometime before we get to that, if you haven't collected your mail, please get that. Let's see, reports from standing committees.
Senate File 51, sponsored by Education, School Finance, Regional Cost Adjustment, and Act relating to school finance. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 51 engrossed. School Finance, Regional Cost Adjustment, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 158, sponsored by Appropriations, Public Employee Retirement Plan Contributions, an act relating to public employees. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 158, Public Employee Retirement Plan Contributions. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
We're at that order of business of bills on second reading. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 5.
Senate File 5, sponsored by Corporations, Medical Malpractice Statutory Update, an act relating to the Insurance Code.
Senate File 5 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 6.
Senate File 6, sponsored by Corporations, Insurance Rebating Modernization, an act relating to the Insurance Code.
Senate File 6 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 14.
Senate File 14, sponsored by Transportation, Wyoming National Guard Professional Malpractice Liability, an act relating to Wyoming National Guard.
Senate File 14 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 15.
Senate File 15, sponsored by Transportation, Military Leave for State Employees, an act relating to Defense Forces and Affairs.
Senate File 15 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 17.
Senate File 17, sponsored by Transportation, Off-Road Recreational Vehicle, Safety and Insurance, an act relating to motor vehicles.
Senate File 17 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 24.
Senate File 24, sponsored by Judiciary, Financial Exploitation of Vulnerable Adults, an act relating to banks.
Senate File 24 is having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 26.
Senate File 26, sponsored by Labor, Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, an act relating to professional licensing.
Senate File 26 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 28.
Senate File 28, sponsored by Tribal, Livestock Infectious Disease Control, Tribal Inclusion, an act relating to agriculture.
Senate File 28 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 33.
Senate File 33, sponsored by Judiciary, Defining Aircraft for Purposes of Hunting Prohibitions, an act related to game and fish.
Senate File 33 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 36.
Senate File 36, sponsored by Capital Finance, Investment Funds Committee, Selection Panel Amendments, an act relating to the investment of state funds.
Senate File 36 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 42.
Senate File 42, sponsored by Revenue, Taxation of Cigars, an act relating to tobacco taxes.
Senate File 42 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 57.
Senate File 57, sponsored by Appropriations, State-Held Drainage District Bonds, an act relating to public funds.
Senate File 57 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 118.
Senate File 118, sponsored by Appropriations, Fund Balance Calculations, Federal Encumbrances Included, an act relating to the administration of government.
Senate File 118 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 122.
Senate File 122, sponsored by Senator Driscoll, non-resident workers, vehicle registration extension, an act relating to motor vehicles.
Senate File 122 having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. All right. We're at that order of business of debate on the Wyoming Manual of Legislative Procedures. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Yin, who's on the Rules Committee, and he's going to do the floor presentation of this. And then we'll have debate rules, which will be your second reading debate rules. Each person can be up twice. And then we will, Chief, do we have to have a motion to move these? I would assume, but I don't see a script for that. All right, let's just stand at ease for a second until we figure out the motion. She went that way to find the motion, I think. Right. Once again, remember to get the manual out there in your mailbox if you haven't. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt the revised Wyoming Manual of Legislative Procedures. And we'll go through the manual in full, but hopefully just give a high-level overview of all the changes in it. And then we'll take questions during our normal form of debate and then answer them as we conclude. So if you see on the first page of the manual, it says that the manual is reviewed by Management Council at least every 4 years. You can also look at the very first change. This manual was last updated in 2008, so it's actually been a little longer than that, which is why LSO and Management Council decided now is the time to actually go through the whole manual and find updates. So this one will be current 2023, assuming we approve it. And we also add that we want to make sure it's not inconsistent with the Constitution, and especially how we decide things between the two houses. But the manual as a whole, maybe just give everyone a little bit background on what the manual is supposed to do. It addresses issues that are not addressed by rules, so things that are not in our rules, including how we operate between the two houses, like things during the interim, when we do joint interim committees, et cetera. Addresses the legislative process in a more sequential order. So basically, step by step, the manual kind of outlines how we go through certain activities as we operate as a legislature. Identifies precedents of the two bodies, so things that we've done over time, especially in the last 15 years, that we've decided this is the way that we've operated in the House, and this puts it in the manual so future legislatures understand where that precedent came from in the House. And then it also identifies the differences in the rules between the House and the Senate, because we do have slightly different rules, and it's good for us in each chamber to understand what are the different rules in the other body, so we know how we operate with each other. So what Management Council had done in the previous year is that they created a subcommittee to look over the changes that LSO was recommending that we make to the manual. So LSO, between the director and one of the previous directors from LSO, worked on a bunch of changes to the manual, brought it in front of a subcommittee. The subcommittee made its own amendments, brought it to the Management Council. The Management Council worked on it themselves, and then its final draft ended up going to each of our individual rules committees, and then each of individual rules committees during this session did a little bit of changes, brought it to the Joint Rules Committee, and after the Joint Rules Committee, it's going to each of our chambers right now. Some of the changes over the past 15 years, were updating rule references. So our rule references have changed in the past 15 years, made some technical corrections, and provided some additional clarification around the interpretations of specific rules and additional precedents and historic practices. And these are all drawn from LSO staff experience, as well as talking with our clerks on their experience throughout all of our sessions, determine what was considered precedent. And then with that, with the discussions of the rules committees and the subcommittee and Management Council. So there was a proposed joint rule, but that's not here, so I'm not going to talk about that. So we'll go into the substantive changes of every page. So on page 1, we're just talking about the inconsistency, talked about that. So if we go to the first page, the actual page 1 and not the page Romanette 1, we go to part 1, page 1. So this new language was inserted by the subcommittee to make clear that the provisions of the manual or the rulings of the presiding officer was based on that's in the manual can be modified by a majority vote of either body. So we as a body still decide what our procedure ultimately is, but the procedures in the Wyoming Manual of Legislative Procedures is still in here, but it makes sure that we aren't, in future legislative sessions, aren't necessarily bound by what we have in a document that, again, might be 15 years before we update again, but we as a body still make those decisions. And so continuing into part 2, this is talking about a 15 co-sponsor limit. So this is, again, only the co-sponsor request sent through the extranet. It's not talking about co-sponsors where you can still get them signed in person, and all of that still happens today. So this is the current practice that we have today, is that the max number of approvals that we can request through the extranet is still 15. And all it does is really just outline that current practice. And then we go to page 2. It's just adding, again, what is our current practice. Bills have to be pre-filed by who's a member of the next legislature. And if you are an incumbent legislator, but you're not coming back for the next session, you can still have the bills prepared. But again, the bill can't be pre-filed unless you are an incumbent that will be a member of the next legislative session. And then it outlines a statutory reference where how legislative committees can sponsor legislation as well. So that's part of the manual that's talking about how bills are pre-filed and how we assign numbers. We go into section 4. This new language is example of an insertion of precedent in order to guide bodies in the future. So it's talking about past custom and how we've had a couple of special sessions these last couple of years, and the custom of the legislature is that that particular constitutional provision is about the regular or budget session and not a special session. So going on to pages 3 and 4, talking about first reading of the bill. So we're talking about direct referral to committee of the whole. So we've had a practice in both houses that about the adoption of a mirror budget bill. And the last sentence specifying a requirement for a 2/3 vote for direct referral to committee of the whole other than appropriations bill. So that's a conclusion of a reading of the House and Senate rule for a couple of those that are referred. And in a 2021 memo, LSO concluded that was the best analysis. And so that's really talking about how the joint rule is specific for the budget bill. And then we go into section 7. So this is talking about a do not pass motion and a without recommendation motion and what those actually mean and how they need to be submitted to the chief clerk. And then the new language on page 4 is required to be reported out, but placed on general file. So they while do not pass are generally not immediately reported out of committee. So and then we're talking about all the bills that have no action on them. They're still required to be reported out on the last day schedule. So the new language is about, on the first paragraph, I'm sorry, just trying to get all the notes because there's a lot of notes because it's a lot of changes in the manual. There's some language on how substitute bills can be worked. So substitute bills basically should only be recommended by a committee or a chairman. And the issue with that is because a substitute bill takes a lot of work from LSO. So only if something is so heavily amended that a substitute bill is required. And then it kind of outlines who can actually do that. And then the procedure to help a committee chair on what those details need to be on determining whether a substitute bill should or should not be drafted. And then the return of the committee reports. This language is about some uncertainties between House and Senate Rule 5.4, and it provides some language of what historic practice is to help give some guidance to clerk, staff, and committee chairs. And it provides some discretion to the committee chair to really understand how you dispose of amendments and how those get to the clerk and the attorney's office for those to come back to our committee of the whole as the committee's report. So pages 5 and 6, the part about general file, this new language was to explain historic practice and provide guidance of essentially what the Senate does about their committee recommendations. Then continuing on page 6, so this is more a guidance for members just to understand what the procedure of the committee of the whole is and how it's governed, so it references the Constitution. We go into page 7, so we're talking about second reading and third reading of the bill. So these kind of outline our distinct practices and protocols in each of the house. And so to help us understand what's going on in their side, as well as for them to understand what goes on in our side, and kind of outlines what are the rules that are referenced to be able to go through what happens in second and third readings. And then continuing to page 8, it's how we amend bills. So amending bills, this is, again, it really just goes through the whole process. This is just to outline what the process is so everyone can look in here and don't have to memorize every rule on how bills are amended, as well as providing the references to all those rules. So if you need to understand what the exact rule is in that process, it still references the rule, as well as talking about constitutional requirements, right? So we've talked often in this body about how amendments have to be germane to a bill and relate to the single subject. It refers to the constitutional provision as well as the Mason citation of what this body often refers to, and it talks about the historic practice of the House and Senate. So the House especially, we talk about how we often go into Rules Committee. So you can see that last paragraph before engrossing on page 9 is talking about the historic practice of the House and Senate. So this is a limit of co-sponsors, and this is generally just historic practice again. And then the engrossing part of the process, right? So when the bill comes out of the first chamber, this is how what the process is, where LSO takes in all the amendments from the first chamber, puts it in an engrossed version of the bill, and that's what the second chamber starts working off as well. Going on to page 10, we're kind of outlining conference committee actions. So again, this new language is mostly guidelines for what the conference committee does, and its inclusion is intended to help avoid disputes and debates of what the conference committee's authority is. And so this really just outlines for everyone in both bodies to understand where things lie in a conference committee and what they do in the conference committee. As well as when we're talking about receding for non-concurrence. So I'm sure the chairman that will talk today about whether motions to concur, so you can either concur or non-concur. If for some reason a chamber decides not to concur, you can actually make a motion to recede from that non-concurrence and then end up concurring again if for some reason we changed our mind or the other chamber changed their mind and decided it wanted to concur after it had decided to not concur. And then page 10 into page 11, we're talking about bills presented to the governor, as well as the process of what a veto and override looks like. So this language is about the notice that the legislature, which is, I believe, a constitutional requirement of when the legislature can receive a vetoed message if it hasn't adjourned, and it allows that chief clerk to make sure they do that. This is, I believe, is practice that we have already done, and it just solidifies it into our manual. And references an attorney general opinion that we are also agreeing with the position of. We're not contesting. So there's no changes for a little while. So I'm just making sure I'm not missing anything. So on page 15, there's some new language on seconding motions. This is talking about some Senate specific guidelines, and we're kind of cleans up that language that was existing just to specify what historic practice in the Senate is, as well as what the references to our current rules and seconding motions are. Then we go on to page 17. So this is about what happens when each body adopts a joint rule, but they aren't identical. So the last couple of sessions, this has happened more, where a couple of our joint rules aren't identical. It talks about what happens when that happens and how LSO is guided in dealing with a joint rule that's only implemented one way in one chamber and a different way in a different chamber. And this, I believe there was some debate in Management Council on, but maybe other members will be able to fill in some of the notes on that. And then going on to page B1, so this is the first page on Appendix B, it talks about procedure of the Committee of the Whole. So it just does some clarification on who can offer amendments, like if the standing committee chairman isn't there or their designee. And then going on to B3, we add some new sections. So this talks about how we adopt the Committee of the Whole report. So in the House, it's been a couple times, but not very often, there's been a motion to divide the Committee of the Whole report. And I believe that that action essentially, for example, if a bill had died or passed and some member wanted to undo that action from the Committee of the Whole report, once we rise and report, when that motion is made to adopt the Committee of the Whole report, the House has sometimes divided that part of the report out to cancel that action from the Committee of the Whole. So if for something that had passed the Committee of the Whole, the House has divided the report after it rose and report, it undid the action of it passing the Committee of the Whole report. And so that really just outlines that historic practice that had happened there, as well as outlining what requirements and what House rules govern some of the actions that happen in Committee of the Whole. So going
Mr.
on to
Speaker?
Appendix D, Provision 3. So this talks about what is quote unquote an enrolled copy. So enrolling isn't a real word in the dictionary, but what it's used here is to talk about after something leaves the second chamber and the two chambers decide that they want to go into a conference committee, LSO can work on an enrolled copy, which has the changes from both chambers put into a single bill, so the conference committee members can understand what each of those portions are.
Representative Yin, we have a question. So you'll only get to ask questions twice. So do you want to wait to the end or do you want to use one of them now?
I just, and whatever, I just want to know,
Just
okay,
to
right
me
now.
first.
Mr. Speaker,
Thank you.
Representative, this is great, but I lost you when you started with Section V. I don't see that, and then my packet goes into the appendix. So if you would just clarify where we're at, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you. So after the page numbers start going after the main portion of the manual, so page 18 is the last page of the main portion of the manual. It goes into the appendices. And so what I'm saying, section, I mean Appendix A. So Appendix A is about standing committee report checklist. Appendix B is the procedure in the committee of the whole. So it's really just a separate appendix to really discuss the procedure in the committee of the whole. But their page numbers are different. So Appendix B, for example, starts at B.1. And so I'll refer to the appendix page numbers by their appendix letter first and then the page number. So we are currently, I've moved on to Appendix D as in dog. And so we're on D1. So this is about the conference committee report checklist. And I was talking about what an enrolled copy works. And again, this is what happens in a joint conference committee after a bill exits the second chamber and the original chamber decides not to concur with those changes. A conference committee can be appointed, and this is the process of what happens in that conference committee. And in D1 on part 5, right, so 5F, so this new language is practice that has been followed by staff in the past. So B and C may not be followed in extremely rare instances, and that's because it could be lack of time at the end. And so this is to let the public know who reads the manual, as well as staff understand that when there's a time crunch, this is how things are prioritized. So moving on to Appendix F. So F.3 is when you see a lot of new language. Appendix F3. So this is about a motion for a late introduction of a bill and what that looks like. So it refers to the rules on how we have bill deadlines, and it really tells you when you can make those motions, as well as what's required to make that motion happen. So for example, a late introduction requires a 2/3 motion. And then it talks about sometimes there are different rules that govern it, right? So in part 9 on F3, it takes unanimous consent in the Senate, but 2/3 of those elected in the House. And so again, this is just language outlining what those motions are, so everyone understands what those motions are. Those motions are still basically what's outlined in our rules or in Mason's. So on Appendix H, page 3, we have new language on action of administrative rule orders. So this is new language that's added based on a rule from the Senate. We don't have any administrative rule orders in our order of business, and that's, again, specific to statutory. Sorry, just looking through my notes. And then referring to a joint rule on how that works. So, okay, so from my understanding, the House doesn't take any action, and so maybe this is something that other members can help me out with on the administrative rule orders, if there are any questions on it.
Representative Yin, I think it's only rarely ever happened that there's ever been an action on the floor on an administrative rule. I think that's the testimony we heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, sorry, so I was misreading my notes. So the new language regarding a Senate rule is actually that signing of enrolled acts. So that's a new Senate rule and that's why that language is in there reflective of that. So the administrative rule order is telling us what we need to do in the cases of an administrative rule order. But again, as the speaker said, it just rarely happens. And so having that language in the manual is helpful for if we ever do need to deal with an administrative rule order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And then moving on to Appendix I, we're talking about legislative vote requirements. And so these, it's kind of a good outline of where things require unanimous consent, where things require 2/3 vote, where things are a majority vote. It's I mean, I guess you could call it a little bit of a cheat sheet. And then it references all of the either rules or the Constitution or Mason's sections of where those actual vote requirements can be found. And then moving on to Appendix K, page 4. So the legislature has taken a position. So this is talking about legislative procedure with regards to veto again. So it's talking about if we have an adjourn and die, the clerk can still receive the veto. And when we are not here, but still not adjourned to die, where we can still count those days within that 3-day period of when we have to respond to a veto. Or sorry, so we can still receive the veto within the time that the governor has to return a veto to us. Appendix K6 talks about more language about what happens with vetoes, and then the constitutional reference. So if we see Appendix M, you see a lot of that language is taken out. So the reason it's taken out is because we actually inserted the sample interim committee rules into our rule book. And so because this is the exact language that's in a rule book, we didn't want to have it in there twice. So it's just removed from the manual and it exists in the rule book now. And then you can see that what that means on Appendix M, page 3. So after all the new language is strucken out, sorry, the old language is strucken out, you can see new language, and it talks about how the rules that are in our rule book are sample interim rules, and at the first session, at the first meeting of the interim, the committees can adopt either the sample rules or they can make changes to the sample rules as their rules for the interim committee, including talking about vote requirements, et cetera. And then part 2 of that, we're talking about proxy and absentee voting. So proxy voting, again, is when a member can vote for somebody else. We've never allowed that, but we've kind of used the word proxy and absentee interchangeably. So this basically just says proxy voting isn't allowed. We can't let other members vote for us, but we can allow absentee voting. So this outlines what absentee voting is allowed, and it's still subject to the discretion of the chairman. However, the chairman shall announce the standard at the first regularly scheduled meeting of the committee and apply the same standard throughout the biennium. And so if the chairman wants to set a standard, they'll set it at the first meeting. And the next sentence talks about if they fail to announce the standard at the first meeting of the biennium, then absentee voting shall be permitted. So the default, as it were, is that absentee voting is allowed. If the chairman want to set a different standard than the default, they set it at the first committee meeting. So we talked about in our Joint Rules Committee on whether we wanted to make that the default or make not having absentee voting the default. The Joint Rules Committee settled on making absentee voting the default, but there's still discretion of the chairman. And there's more discretion of the chairman given in the last sentence, which is only members who have attended a substantial portion of the committee's discussion can vote absentee. So you still have to be at the committee or be part of the discussion of a bill before the committee chairman gives you discretion that you can vote on that bill, even if absentee voting is allowed. Appendix N talks about the process for bill drafting, co-sponsors, when a bill draft needs to be resubmitted. So this outlines really the process between us as members and LSO on how we get bill drafts and how we get co-sponsors. Again, it talks about the limit of co-sponsors through the extranet, but you can still have a greater number of co-sponsors in that part C on Appendix N before the bill even gets printed. So again, 15 is still just the requirement for the extranet. It isn't the requirement for everything. And then we go into more on how fiscal notes are drafted and what the procedure is of that is, so everyone understands how fiscal notes work and how they're prepared, how they're attached to a draft, as well as what the sponsor responsibility is with regards to the fiscal note as well. Appendix O talks about just what the procedure is for requesting an amendment, drafting an amendment. Again, these are all how we currently do things, and we're just enshrining it in the manual. And then Appendix B is the same thing, but for substitute bills. This just makes it very easy for us to understand one specific process that we do in the legislature, and then just outlining it all in one place. And then at the very back is Appendix Q. So this is something that was requested from Management Council, and this is the procedural hierarchy. So the new members who did new member training saw this list, and essentially it's how we as a legislature, what the hierarchy is of things that govern how we operate. So constitutional provisions are always at the top, and judicial decisions, they're on the Constitution. Our rules, the manual falls below our rules, then we have custom usage and precedent, and then we have statutory provisions related specifically to legislative procedures. So again, as a body, we are not necessarily bound to procedurally what's in statute. We can always override that, so no previous body can decide what we as the body do. But it still holds precedent in that hierarchy, but we can always overrule it with an adopted rule or a new statute, et cetera. And then we talk about adopted parliamentary law, and that's Mason's manual, and then other parliamentary law. And with that, I will take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There aren't question having been called. The question is, shall we adopt the amendments to the Wyoming Manual of Legislative Procedures? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Houston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haraldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strzok? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washit? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Heiner, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 40 aye, 22 no.
With your vote, the changes to the Wyoming Manual of Legislative Procedures have been adopted. Chief, just want to visit a minute. So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, so what we're going to do is we'll do some general file. And I think by our rule book, by our order of business, we do concurrence after general file. So we'll do concurrences after that, and I'll go around to the chairman and make sure I got their conference committees correct. So with that, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Representative Penn. Hey!
The Committee of the Whole will please come to order. The first bill up for consideration is House Bill 18. The reading, Senate File 18. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 18, sponsored by Transportation. Benefits for spouses of law enforcement members, an act relating to the administration of government. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 18. Benefits for spouses of law enforcement members, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes. Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraft, Smith, Stivar, Wiley. Representative Brown, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Brown?
Thank you, Chairwoman. My motion is that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 18 do pass. There are no amendments, and I will turn the explanation over to the good Vice Chair of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Ms. Chairman. Senate File 18, real easy, quick bill, since I'm sitting in front of a fellow Natrona County person. It amends the death benefit for law enforcement retirement plan and the State Highway Patrol, Game and Fish Wardens, and DCI. All this amendment does, or all this bill does, is make the amendments or the bills the same. There are no the benefits, update the benefits for the general law enforcement pension, and the DCI patrol and warden pension matches that of the existing law enforcement. If you serve 20 years and you retire a day after, your benefits change. A line of duty officers only get paid 50%, but law enforcement officers, our troopers, our DCI and game and warden only get paid 50%. If you're a law enforcement officer, you get 62.5%. All this bill does is make both the law enforcement people equal. I'll stand for questions. Question being called?
Question being called. Those in, Representative Larson.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chairman. So the one question I had is in that last section of new language where it talks about based on his last, the amount at the time of his passing being based on his salary at the time. Is there ever a situation when his salary might have been higher at a time prior to his salary at the time of passing?
Madam Chair, good question. A lieutenant making overtime gets paid more than a captain that is sitting in the office not doing lots of extra work on extra duty out on the patrols. So a lieutenant might be making more money as a lieutenant, and then when he makes captain, his salary goes down because his hours get shortened. But as that time, as a lieutenant making extra hours, he could have been making extra money or more money than a captain. And that was brought up in the conference or the committee. Any other questions?
Any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Brown's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 18 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 18 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 20. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate file.
For our consideration is Senate File 20. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 20, sponsored by Transportation. Driver's license and ID card photo quality, an act relating to driver's license and identification cards. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 20 engrossed, driver's license and ID card photo quality, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraph, Wiley. Noes, Representative Smith, Stivar. Representative Brown, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My motion is, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 20 do pass. There are no amendments, and I will turn over the explanation to the good freshman representative from House District 39.
Representative Wiley.
Madam Chair, thank you. This is a pretty simple bill. The departments are for it. It's going to make them easier. They've changed to another material that we're printing our licenses from, and these color photos that they're printing onto the license are blurred times. Sometimes they're miscolored. If you have a new one, you could take it out of your wallet and look at it. Without looking at the description or anything, you could look at what eye color you have. Well, there is no discrepancy there between what you see on the picture and then what's said on the license. So what the departments want to do is change from a color photo to a black and white photo that's physically on the front of the license, and that's going to make the clarity of the picture on there easier to see and determine that yes, this is who they say they are. This is the person that belongs to that driver's license. Fear not, you still have access to color photos. You just have to run it on the back side of the license. So if an officer needs to look at a color photo, they still have access to that when you're registering to vote or something. If they need to look at a color photo, there will still be access to that. This is just simply to make it a clear photograph for the front of the identification card in the field as presented today. That's basically it. It's a good bill.
Representative Jennings.
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. Will this make me look older or younger?
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm curious if there was any pushback during committee from law enforcement in doing this. Thank you.
Representative Wiley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the questions. The good representative from the north part of the state, no, sir, I think you're doomed. For the other representative just down the road here, they're in support of this, law enforcement.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair, on and for the bill. I was a little skeptical. I've received a lot of mail that is kind of everybody's got their panties in a wad over this thing, but I'm sorry. I'm an old soldier. It doesn't make it right, but that's what it is. Anyway, the new driver's licenses are printed on a polycarbonate material. The polycarbonate material does not take a color photograph well. It tends to blur it, and it makes it harder to actually see the details. So the new equipment, which has already been delivered, they're already using it, is able to do a black and white image with much more clarity than what you get out of a color one. They gave us examples, we looked at them, and I'm firmly convinced it's a better system. One of the questions was about, should we get, we don't see the hair color, those, the eye color, that sort of thing. Those are specifically written. The eye color is specifically written on the front of the card so that you can see what color eyes you should see, even though you can't see it in the black and white photograph. And on the back of the driver's license, you see a barcode that can be scanned, and that has additional information, including the hair color. It was discussed that hair colors today tend to be subject to the whim of the week, and so that really doesn't matter as much. For anyone who may be considering this, if my opinion is worth anything to you, I think this is a good move. I would like to allay some of the fears of some of the people that have written so many, again, on and for the bill.
Is there any further discussion? Oh, Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairperson, I have one question. How does this affect your concealed weapons permit? Because it seems to be on the same type of material.
Representative Wiley.
Madam Chair, thank you. To the good representative just down the road from me, I think as of now, it won't affect it at all. Like I said earlier, all they have to do is flip it over. They can access all the information that you have on record just from running the number, the barcode on the back.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Actually, so the answer is halfway correct on that. As of right now, nothing will change. But in the future, and if you look at the actual bill itself, it does say that ID cards, and that is encompassing with any of those types of cards that I see a lot of people passing around, taking a look at them. Once this goes into effect, any of those newly issued cards will then become black and white printed. And what it is the good representative from the center part of the state was mentioning is this actually pulls a black, not ink, but it actually pulls a black surface out of the substrate of the card. And that's what allows it to be seen a little bit differently. The department has actually transferred the location where these cards are made to be closer to the printer. They've done a lot of work to try to make the color photos work, and they just don't seem to work as well. So upon the completion of this and upon passage of this bill going through, everything from that point forward will then turn into black and white photos.
Representative Singh.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question. Will this affect your ability to get an international driver's license?
Representative Wiley.
Madam Chair, I don't believe so.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Brown's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 20 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 20 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 41. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 41, sponsored by Revenue, skill-based amusement games, authorized locations, an act relating to gaming. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 41 engrossed, skill-based amusement games, authorized locations, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Bear, Byron, Harshman, Locke, Northrup, Oakley, Storer, Strzok, Swanitzer. Representative Harshman, Chairman.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chair, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 41 do pass. And I also move for the adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment. And Madam Chair, I'd like to move the Standing Committee Amendment, talk briefly about it, vote on it, and then turn the explanation of the bill over to the good representative from House District 35, I believe. Yes. So, Madam Chair, members, the Standing Committee Amendment really, it's all about skill-based games. We've had a moratorium. Now we're going to put limitations on where they go. That's what this bill does. And there's a couple that are out there that need, this little cleanup was brought to us as it needs in the bill to clean them. It affects 2 operators, that's all, but really changes the word game to games and eliminates the word operating. And I'd stand for any questions. And then I'd vote on this and we can move on to the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing no discussion, okay. Question being called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to turn the explanation over to the good freshman representative from House District 35.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just quick summary of this bill. So this is some legislation that went in, I think, in 2020 maybe, to basically set the groundwork for the gaming. And I think at that point it was realized that this could become the proliferation of the gaming was a bit out of control. So I think it was put on a moratorium. So this legislation is all they've done here in this bill, just to keep it quite simple, is they've just put some sideboards on this to make sure this doesn't go everywhere. Just to make this very simple, they're just trying to make sure that these games aren't placed into every laundromat, every some examples that were used is, they don't want this showing up in the school's teachers' lounge, in retirement homes and those kinds of things. So this is trying to put sideboards on that to make sure every single store you go into downtown, when you go downtown, doesn't have 2 of these games and folks playing them there. The organizations are all supporting this, including organizations that put these games out. So the support is very comprehensive. And again, this just limits that capability. And I know there may be some people in the group that say, hey, why would we put any restrictions on this at all? But I think in general, not having it, making sure this doesn't completely get out of control in terms of where locations that were to put this in place. This bill is just basically putting some decent sideboards, giving us an opportunity to roll this capability out in a very graceful and simple way. I'd like to have your favorable consideration of this bill. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you. So this is having been here through this whole conversation on skills games and other sorts of amusements, and we changed our gaming laws. We're making some policy decisions here, and I think if I'm understanding the presenter of this, is we're now saying these are the locations that skills games can be in. But yet in the last of that, we're putting some exemptions in, and we're saying, but for those that already exist in areas that are not complying here, we're grandfathering, for lack of a better term, for allowing them to stay in. And so my question is then on the committee, if this is a policy decision that this is where they should be and this is where they shouldn't be, why are we still allowing those that shouldn't be to stay? So.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, it was discussed very broadly, and the discussion included the fact that there are only, I believe, 2. I think the chairman mentioned there's only 2. I thought there was 2 or 3. I couldn't remember exactly. And in that discussion, these specific locations where these that were being grandfathered, basically in the discussion, it was identified that these aren't in locations that are of a concern. They're not next to schools and things like that. So they're not areas. So the prevailing wisdom, at least in the discussion, was that it wasn't a big problem for us to leave these in place and grandfather them in.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To follow up, a good representative from Fremont County, 2 locations, one's in a convenience store and one is in a laundromat. They've been operating, but the operators of those have agreed now to follow, if we pass this statute and the rules that are being developed, to cordon those off with at least a half wall, which is in the rules, so no one under 21 can have access. Same with the convenience store. But they're already in business, so we didn't want to grandfather 2 locations. So thank you.
Any further discussion? Oh, Representative Davis.
To the good bringer of the bill, I'm on the bill, but I think the pushback I've had or heard is that we need to tighten up the definition of truck stops in there. Currently, you know, a truck stop, according to the definition, is a large roadside service station restaurant for truck drivers. So we need to work on a little bit of that, tightening up that language and bring them sideboards, as they call, in just a little bit.
Representative Locke.
And I think we have some latitude to tighten this up as we move forward. There was some description or some explanation, and I know the goal was to, these locations specifically were chosen to try to make sure that they're in locations that I think people perceive or consider to be more reasonable locations. So there may be some additional guidance that can be applied to this, but this particular bill at least gives us the opportunity to roll this out in a gradual and more controlled fashion. So I believe it at least provides that level. And then if there's some additional amendments or recommendations, of course, that can be considered.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the good representative from District 47 on the definition of a truck stop. Glad you asked. If you look in the digest, what came out of the joint committee bill over the interim and was changed by our friends down the hall, I think it loosens it up a little bit. And it could be if you wanted to, but I think we talked about it in committee here yesterday and basically decided, you know, you don't want to sacrifice the good for the perfect necessarily, and how far do you go and how much conference committee you go. This bill needs to pass. And it's a good definition, not as good as it was, but we'd certainly work on that in second and third reading amendments. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Davis.
I think Madam Chair, the original intent was to capture those dollars that are going across the state on I-80, or can I say that? On these large interstates and highways was the original intent of that, to have that available to those people for their recreation. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Harshman's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 41 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 41 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 59. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 59, sponsored by Travel, State Parks Accounts, Agency Expenditure Authority, an act relating to state lands. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 59, State Parks Account, Agency Expenditure Authority. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Newsom, Storer, Western, Winter. Noes, Representative Singh. Representative Newsom, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Newsom?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 59 do pass. I turn the presentation over to the representative where the mountains are grand.
Representative Storr.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Chairman Newsom. Senate File 59 deals with State Parks Accounts Agency Expenditure Authority, sponsored in the interim by the Travel Committee. This bill addresses the statutory authority for how the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources can use the fees generated from permits that are required for the use of state parks, recreation areas, and historical sites. These permits were first established in 1999 and allow the department to collect fees and use them for capital improvements, maintenance, and site interpretation, such as exhibits, signage, and displays, as approved by the legislature. If you go to state parks, you know that you usually have to pay a fee. You can pay a day use fee or get an annual pass. You need to pay a fee for overnight camping, the use of lodge or picnic shelter facilities. So that's what we're talking about here. This bill amends Section H of 36-4-121, and it does 4 things. First off, it removes the current sunset provision that runs out June 30th of this year. It maintains the expanded definition of what these fees can be used for to include not just maintenance, but operational costs. In other words, not just stuff, but people. Seasonal park rangers, fee collectors, and interpretive programming. It maintains that the current percentage of the fees for the use of these items is capped at 60%, so that the balance is available for additional capital improvements. And it maintains that these funds cannot be used to cover the costs associated with permanent employees. Just a little bit of history, why this bill is here. Like many of our state agencies, State Parks and Cultural Resources has taken a hit through budget reductions over the last 8 years. Those total roughly about $3.5 million in general fund over a biennium. As a result, the department has requested a higher percentage of these fees over time be expanded to cover these general fund losses. So that has gone from 25 to 30 to 60%. The current spending rate for the agency is actually below 50% of the total fees collected. Those fees have run about $5 million a year, so they're spending about under $2.5 million. And they feel that these are expenditures that are critical to the safety and enjoyment of visitors. They offered at Glendo State Park as an example. Sometimes they'll have 35,000 visitors on a summer weekend. They maintain 17 campgrounds, 540 campsites, 9 water systems, and 2 sewage lagoons. So it's kind of like a little city. They manage that with 4 permanent employees and 2 law enforcement park rangers, but this gives them the ability to expand those operations with additional personnel for seasonal law enforcement, fee collectors, and interpreters. So this bill will allow the maintenance and operation of our state parks to continue. If we don't pass this bill, there are concerns that with the reduction in seasonal workforce that we will have to close some of these sites. So on and for the bill, any questions are most welcome.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Newsom's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 59 do pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Senate File 59 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 63. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 63, sponsored by Revenue. Tax Administration Revisions, an act relating to taxation and revenue. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3 Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 63 engrossed, Tax Administration Revisions, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baer, Byron, Harshman, Locke, Northrup, Oakley, Storer, Strzok, Swanitzer. Representative Harshman, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Harshman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rise to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 63 do pass. There are no amendments. And I'd like to turn the explanation of this nice, good little bill over to the freshman representative from House District 23.
Representative Nestor.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. All right, this one's even easier, I think. Senate File 63 is a bill that just provides some statutory fixes, again, sponsored by Joint Revenue Interim Committee. The purpose of the bill is to have some consistency between sales and use tax and mineral product tax statutory language to help eliminate the confusion that has existed for taxpayers in the past. It does two things. The first can be found in Title 39, Chapter 14, related to mine product taxes. It clarifies that the statutory authority for the Department of Revenue to credit or waive interest related to mine products. So this language exists in Chapter 15 that deals with ad valorem or sales tax, but was missing in Chapter 14, which deals with severance or mine product taxes. So the bill inserts the language from 3915-108 throughout those sections of Chapter 14 dealing with the different types of minerals. The Senate did put an amendment in that included the word severance, and you can see that on page 2, line 11, and throughout the additional sections of the bill. So section 108, section 108 deals with coal, 208 deals with oil and gas, 308 trona, 408 bentonite, 508 uranium, 608 sand and gravel, and 708 all other valuable products. The second thing the bill does is it includes language from Title 39, Chapter 14, Article 1, Section 108, related to audits of both sales and use taxes that specify that any assessment or levy, including the assessment of a penalty or interest, resulting from final audit findings must be issued no later than 1 year following the completion of the audit. Again, this language wasn't in these two sections. So we create two new paragraphs, 6, little Roman numeral 6, under both 3915-108 and 3916-108. So just some statutory fixes. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Harshman's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 63 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 63 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 68. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 68, sponsored by Select Water. Prescriptive easement for water conveyances, an act relating to prescriptive easements. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 68 engrossed, prescriptive easement for water conveyances, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Excused, Representative Crago. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Mr. Chairman Eklund?
Madam Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 68 do pass. There is an amendment, and I will move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 68, and I'll explain the amendment with the bill, and we can vote on it at the appropriate time. So this, folks, is an attempt to codify what we have in state law concerning easements, primarily irrigation ditches that are on property in which the owner of the water right in the ditch does not own the surface where the ditch is at or the structure is at that that we're talking about. What it does is it sets up, we're trying to codify what's been done in state law or in case law. Probably the major cases were done maybe 50 years ago. And a reason for doing that, we believe that it would be beneficial to the public in Wyoming to be able to go to statute and research what their rights are, rather than having to hire attorneys and go into court to do what's already been done. So this law will not be in Title 41, it'll be in 34, which has to do with title transfers and conveyances and what have you. I'll kind of walk through the bill. And as I was, one of the changes that we did in this was language change to what the state engineer would do. And they will post, they won't maintain a website with information on the prescriptive easement. And I see in line 5 on page 1 that we're using the word maintain instead of post, and I may be bringing a second reading amendment to fix that if necessary, if this bill passes. But an act relating to prescriptive easements, establishing prescriptive easements for water conveyances, provided requirements for the width and use of a prescriptive easement as specified, requiring the state engineer's office to maintain an informational document providing notice to the purchaser specifying applicability and providing for an effective date. So the requirements of this prescriptive easement, there are several things that happen. One, you have to have a 10-year period of time when you've used this irrigation ditch or this structure continuously. Now, continuous and uninterrupted isn't necessarily every year, but you can go 5 years without using the ditch before it's abandoned. Continuous and uninterrupted, open and notorious, you know that the ditch is there. Hostile, the other language that was amended in the Senate was adverse, so you know that you've got some disagreements between the owner of the property and the owner of the water right. The person with the right can file a notice describing the prescriptive easement consistent with the requirements of 34-1-104 in the office of the county clerk. And it sets up access on page 3, access, use, and maintenance of the repair. On page 3, ingressing and egressing, being able to access a property. And it throughout this, well, B, the duty of the landowner. And then if you went back to B on page 2, you'd have a burden of proof. We use rebuttable presumption rather than burden of proof on page 2. Throughout it establishes the duties of each, the landowner as well as the property rights owner. Now, since we're not in water law, in various places, we've inserted water in front of conveyance. And the reason for doing that is we're just kind of out of our, so people understand it has to do with probably irrigation ditches. Then on page 5, line 1, you remove, maintain, and just have post rather than maintain and post by the state engineer. That is the amendment. If there are no questions on it, I would, we may have questions, but if there's no questions on it, we'll vote on that amendment eventually here.
You've heard the motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Representative Davis, not on the amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Davis.
Madam Chairman, yes, this bill is much needed. We're seeing a lot of our ag property being divided up into subdivisions, and there's a lateral usually that goes across them because most of these are irrigable grounds. And so what this does is preclude the neighbor from not allowing you to clean the ditch. You know, the prescribed and easement, and then okay, there's a recorded easement that comes usually with your title search, and the prescribed easement is the normally functioning use of that ground. So all this does is preclude them from keeping you out and allows you to maintain that water flow to your property is the gist of it. It's very well needed. Thank you.
Majority Floor Leader Nyman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That is, when we dealt with this in the committee that takes care of select water, these are issues that are coming up as we continue to see development of lands, but we have adjudicated pre-existing water rights that are crossing many of these previous property. And so, as it says in the legislation or in the bill, these are adjudicated rights. These are rights that are actually been adjudicated, attached to the properties, and all this simply is doing is allowing these water right holders to be able to continue to maintain their ditches and allow them the latitude to be able to do that. So this is a good piece of legislation, and I would encourage your support.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question about page 2, the word hostile. If I could get a little bit of clarification on that. It's an interesting term in that. I know of cases where, you know, landowners have actually, or, you know, landowners have had their fence cut down and other things because the person that owns water rights thinks they have access free and clear kind of through the land. I'm just kind of curious about issues like that arise and what that term hostile means.
Representative Slagle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that word hostile, and I don't know, Chairman Eklund might have a better description on that, but yeah, that was a word that they chose. They had adverse in there before, and so hostile was what they'd come down with, but Chairman Eklund might have a better explanation. The one thing I wanted to point out is they said this, codifying this makes it so when real estate people are selling subdivision that has an irrigation ditch through it, they can tell the people buying that place that if there isn't recorded easement on it, there will be a prescriptive easement most likely. And so it gives the prospective buyers a heads up on what could happen with that purchase. Thank you.
If I can just remind the body as well to please refrain from using names. Representative Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my dad's place had a water right on it, and he lived there for 35 years until he passed. And during that 35 years, he got water twice. So how does this bill contemplate a situation like that, or is it pretty much automatically litigatable? Thank you.
Representative Stith.
Madam Chairman, to address the question about what hostile means, it's a codification of common law. Hostile does not mean that the water right owner has to be belligerent or call the other person names or make obscene gestures. It just means that you're doing it without the consent and you're doing it openly.
Any further discussion? Chairman Eklund?
Yes, Madam Chairman. So what my colleague was talking about with his father's water right is really a different issue that has to do with the water law. This has to do with conveyance. The word hostile is kind of an interesting word to fit that in the middle of legislation. And generally, that's what you would have if you need this prescriptive easement. You've got an adverse relationship between an owner that has this conveyance structure going through their property and the need to maintain that in order to continue the water right by another person. And that's why they do these prescriptive easements. The state engineer would not necessarily have to do a prescriptive easement on every ditch that's in the country, because a lot of them, they just don't have this hostile relationship. They have a history of working together to get the water right, the water transferred and conveyed. I think that those were most of the questions that were being asked. There are no further questions I'd ask for. Oh, we got another question.
Representative Henderson?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm referring to the digest, and our good friends on the other end of the hall on their First Amendment Standing Committee. It says it refers to page 2, line 23, after the word law, and makes a pretty substantial insertion. I just wondered if that came up in discussion. I don't find that on my engrossed copy. Can you help me understand that?
Chairman Eklund?
I'm working off of the engrossed copy, so I'm not sure what the insertion was. I do know that there were amendments that came in. But I really can't respond to it now. I can't help my colleague on that right now.
Thank you. Do we have any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Eklund's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 68 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 68 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 176. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 176, sponsored by Senator Driscoll. Solid Waste Disposal Districts Consolidation, an act relating to counties. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred Senate File 176, Solid Waste Disposal Districts Consolidation. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Banks, Burkhart, Conrad, Heiner, Knapp, Larson, Lawley, Tarver, Western. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman? Oh, Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 176 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I turn the presentation of the bill or the Senate file over to the good representative from District 52.
Representative Tarver.
Madam Chairwoman, this is a really nice little bill. Basically, all it does is allows 2 solid waste disposal districts to consolidate. And before the question comes, it has to be consensual. So one can't force the other. Anyway, I stand for questions if we got some. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Yeah, so my question to the bringer of the bill, does it matter on the age of one of the solid waste districts that are there? Could you help me? Is there anything that governs that?
Representative Tarver.
There was a lengthy discussion about that, and no, as long as they both consent, we figured it would be okay. Thank you.
Representative Brown, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So if one solid waste disposal district is lusting after another one and decides to try to get greedy, we're not going to have an overthrowing or anything like that. Is that correct?
Representative Tarver.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No, this is all on the up and up, but thank you for that great question.
Question being called. All those in favor of, oh, okay, Representative Berger, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure we're not taxing premium toilet paper.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 176 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 176 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate Joint 7. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate Joint Resolution 7, sponsored by Senator Driscoll, support for Taiwan. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate Joint Resolution 7, support for Taiwan, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Angelos, Burkhart, Byron, Larson, Newsom, Singh, Storer, Western, Winter. Representative Newsom, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Newsom?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with the recommendation that Senate Joint 7 do pass, I turn over the presentation to my good co-committeeman.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today I bring you Senate Joint Resolution Number 7. This joint resolution comes every 2 years and just reaffirms our sister state with Taiwan. I'll just give you a little bit of background. It's within the resolution, but I just have a few highlights I'd like to point out. On March 5th, 1984, the state of Wyoming adopted Taiwan as Wyoming's sister state. Taiwan ranks as the United States' 8th largest trading partner, and Taiwan ranks as the United States' 6th largest agricultural goods export destination, and bilateral trade between the United States and Taiwan reached an estimated $114 billion. Taiwan ranks as the state of Wyoming's 8th largest trading partner in Asia, and both the state of Wyoming and Taiwan are committed to strengthening bilateral economic bonds. Taiwan's Ministry of Education and the state of Wyoming's the department that deals with our education, signed a memorandum of understanding on educational cooperation in 2022 to further promote teacher and student exchanges and cultural awareness. And it's just, again, reaffirming its commitment to the strong and deepening relationship between Taiwan and the state of Wyoming. And another interesting fact, our alternative high school in the land where there's the spring and the rock has a cultural exchange program with Taiwan where they meet with Taiwanese students and just explain how life is different in each country, and it's pretty cool. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Newsom's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate Joint Resolution 7 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate Joint Resolution 7 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion that all those in favor, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries. I move the adoption of the committee of the whole, oh, no? Oh, okay.
The reading clerk will read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 18 do pass. Senate File 20 do pass. Senate File 41 do pass amended. Senate File 59 do pass. Senate File 63 do pass. Senate File 68 do pass amended. Senate File 176 do pass. Senate Joint Resolution 7 do pass. Representative Penn, Chairman.
Chairman Penn?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. Congratulations, Representative Penn. Nice job, Representative Penn. So we are at that order of business of request to oh, you got a privilege, yes. Privilege, Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege at the floor.
Please.
Everybody stand back up. We have a birthday on Sunday. Representative Tommy Strzok will get 1 more year older. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday. That's awesome. We're at that order of business of request to concur with Senate amendments to House bills. So remember just kind of how this works. So we do our work over here with a House bill, and then we send it over to the Senate, and then they do their work, and they can amend or not amend. Obviously, these are amendments, so it'll come back. And so then we have, as the House, have to decide whether we concur with the Senate's amendments. And so that's what this process is. And with that, the first message for our consideration is message number, first I need to explain where to find these. So if you go to the bill, go to the bill on the main sheet on the LSO website. So go to House Bill 41 in this case, find it. And then when you click on that bill, click on House Bill 41, and then you'll notice down there on the right side of the page where it says, that shows the PDFs where it's introduced, and those things at the bottom, you'll see a thing that's concurrences. Is anybody finding that? I think some people are finding that. That's a good deal. All right. I think it's important because these can get going kind of fast and furious at times when we get a lot of them. And these are really important for you all to understand. You think you vote one way on a bill, and then suddenly the bill changes, and the chairman and the bringer of the bill, whether it's a committee bill, it's be the chairman of the committee, they have to decide whether they support it, and then we all have to decide whether we support them in that effort. So with that, the first message for our consideration is message number 284 on House Bill 41. Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move concurrence, message 284 on House Bill 41, and it would ask for a no vote. And I'd like to just go speak with our friends down the hall a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, the first portion of this, if you look at the concurrence, is actually quite a bit of just cleanup language. But if you start reading into the second page is where I'd like to have a little bit more discussion on this. This was an interim bill. This was worked through, if you remember the discussion in this House was more centered around whether or not we wanted to include more trailers and whether or not these trailers like going off the off-road areas and getting license plates ripped off. But our friends down the hall decided to go ahead and change out the distribution of funds on this and take it away from just being delivered strictly to the county the same way that our current license plates are. And they amended that to being 50% of the permanent registration fee being collected underneath here would go to the property tax distribution model, but then the other 50% would then go into the highway fund. And that was never really contemplated during the interim as to what that permanent fee was going to look like. And then if you look down below, they actually took that permanent fee from $500 down to $200. Not so much worried about that as much as I am what this actually might do to our county treasurers that have to try to figure out how to divvy up $100 and what that may actually look like. So more than anything, I just want to go down and talk with our good friends down the hall, make sure that we're understanding exactly what they were trying to do, and maybe we can get it back to a little bit further, closer to the side that we had on here, which gave all the money to the counties and allowed them to actually focus on the property tax distribution on this. And we'll go back and we'll bring you guys back a conference committee report.
So
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman
Speaker.
Brown, what's your recommendation on
A no
this?
vote.
Thank you. I think it's important at the end for whoever the bringer is to understand that. We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 41. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Warnock, Jennings,
Excused?
Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washit, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers.
No.
Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 2 aye, 59 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to not concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 41. The House Conference Committee will be Representatives Berger, Representatives Tarver, and Representative Brown chairman. So 2 newbies on that. So you just have to get with your chair and he needs to get with you and he'll explain the process, provided that the Senate could decide they don't want to appoint a committee, but generally they do, and then you guys will resolve that. And so the next message for our consideration is message number 279 on House Bill 24, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I would move that you concur with message number 279 on House Bill 24 and ask for your aye vote.
Chairman Nicholas, I think you have to move that message.
Yeah, I would move message number 279 on House Bill 24 and ask for your aye vote. So ladies and gentlemen, all that happened in this This is the bill where we allowed to increase the salaries for folks in the State Investment Office and the Retirement Office. The only change that our good friends down the hall did is on the last 2 pages, on the funds that we set aside for these fees, is they move and if they don't provide these pay raises, there's a provision in the bill that reverts the money back in June of 2025, and they just changed that date to June 30 of 2024. So I would ask an aye vote for this concurrence.
Anybody want to speak to this? Once again, it's second reading rules on debate. Okay, we are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 24. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Warnock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 24. The next message for our consideration is message number 286 on House Bill 69, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move concurrence on message number 286, House Bill 69, and I ask for your aye vote. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at this, it looks like our friends down the hall did a lot of work on this bill, and in a way they did, but in a way they didn't. It's all wordsmithing. They changed the wording, they changed the order. They felt their wording was best, and I've talked to the sponsor of the bill. He said it's no real effect on the bill. So with that and no questions, I would ask for your aye vote.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 69. A majority of elected members is required. The Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Klauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Warnock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 56 aye, 5 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 69. So just to explain to the new folks, so there can be two reasons to disagree, with the final vote, for example, on a concurrence. One is you don't agree with the language. You kind of trust the people bringing the bill and stuff. The other is if you voted no on the bill originally, then there may be a reason that your final vote would be a no. So that's just a heads up to those that are wondering maybe why that happened. So. All right. Reports from standing committees.
Senate File 8, sponsored by Senator Baldwin. Essential subsidy payments to behavioral health centers, an act relating to public health and safety. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 8. Essential subsidy payments to behavioral health centers, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Chadwick, Clauston, Hornock, O'Hearn, Penn, Trujillo, Ward, Yin, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. Senate File 9, sponsored by Senator Baldwin. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred Senate File 9, Medicaid coverage, licensed pharmacists, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation and do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Chadwick, Clauston, O'Hearn, Trujillo, Yin, Zwanitzer. Noes. Representatives Hornock, Penn, Ward. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. Senate File 11, sponsored by Labor, Cancer Early Detection Amendments, an act relating to public health and safety. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 11 engrossed, Cancer Early Detection Amendments, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Chadwick, Clauston, O'Hearn, Penn, Trujillo, Yin, Zwanitzer. Noes. Representatives Hornock, Ward. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. Senate File 25, sponsored by Judiciary, District and Prosecuting Attorneys, Bar License Requirement, an act relating to district and county and prosecuting attorneys. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 25, District and Prosecuting Attorneys, Bar License Requirement, respectfully report, same back to the House with a recommendation that do pass. Ayes. Representatives Chestick, Crago, Nemec, Oakley, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washut. Noes. Representatives Jennings. Excused. Representative Haroldson. Representative Washut, Chairman. Senate File 31, sponsored by Judiciary, Adjacent Land Resource Data Trespass Repeal, an act relating to crimes and offenses. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 31, Adjacent Land Resource Data Trespass Repeal, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes. Representatives Chestick, Crago, Nemec, Oakley, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washut. Noes. Representatives Haroldson, Jennings. Representative Washut, Chairman. Senate File 34, sponsored by Judiciary, Trespass by Small Unmanned Aircraft, an act relating to crimes and offenses. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 34, Trespass by Small Unmanned Aircraft, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that a do pass failed in accordance with House Rule 5-4. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Oakley. Noes, Representatives Chestick, Haroldson, Jennings, Nemec, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Washit. Representative Washit, Chairman.
All right. Chief, does that clear the deck? Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move House adjourn until 10 a.m. Monday, February 13th, 2023.
Committee announcements. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development will meet at 8 a.m. Monday morning to consider Senate Files 116, Protection of Lawful Commerce and Firearms, Senate File 139, Unlawful Use of Credit Card or Debit Card, and Senate File 173, Financial Institutions, Similar Names.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1 will meet at 8 o'clock on Monday to hear Senate File 55, Senate File 56, Senate File 69, and time permitting, Senate File 91.
Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will hear 2 bills on Monday at noon recess. Will be Senate File 47, Education Repeal of Immunity for Corporal Discipline, and Senate File 84, which is Education Model Student Attendant Policies.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations will meet on adjournment here today for Senate File 71.
Chairman Olson.
House Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions will meet on Monday upon noon recess in E5 to hear 2 bills, Senate File 40, Federal Political Action Committee Reports, and Senate File 43, EMS Districts.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 10, Labor, Health, Social Services will meet 8 a.m. on Monday to hear Senate File 37 and Senate File 79.
Anybody else? You have heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. The House is adjourned until 10 a.m. Monday, February 13th, 2023.